The topic today is about how do we increase revenue through knowing our customers. And I've got 3 examples for you on how we do that at Social Point. But just before I launch into that, I'd like to explain a little bit more about what we do at Social Point and who we are. So we make games that are free to play. And when we're talking about increasing revenue, that's a little bit paradoxical because you can play our games completely for free, and most people do. We are best known for our 2 titles, Monster Legends and Dragon City. These games have been downloaded about 200 million times. That means about 2% of the world's population has downloaded a Social Point game, which is amazing to think about. We are a Barcelona company. We were born and bred based here, right here. We have 250 people at the moment. All of them are here in Barcelona. So we think of ourselves very much as coming from this city. I want to try and show you a video. Hopefully maybe Paul can help me do that in a minute. I want to show you a video of Dragon City because I think it's useful if you haven't played the game, if you're amongst the 98% of the world that hasn't played the game. I want to show it to you because when we start to talk about the analytics examples, it's more useful if you have a sense of the game. And you will see that there are 2 key elements inside Dragon City. There are 2 main things you can do. You can breed your dragons. There are 400 dragons that you can collect and create a big world of dragons if you wish. And you can battle your dragons, so you can fight against them.
In Dragon City, legends are waiting to be born. Breed your dragons. Feed your dragons. Battle your dragons against millions of players from around the world and discover who will become the next Dragon Master. Dragon City. Download now for free.
Okay. So now you have a sense of what the game is. Thank you for your help with that. And I'm here to talk about how do we increase revenues. Well, before I do that, let's just think about what is it that the customer is buying in Dragon City. And I'd like to compare and contrast our game with a more traditional console game. I just happened to pick Lego Marvel, but think of any Xbox game or PlayStation game. If you are a consumer of an Xbox game, you go, you pay your 50 or 60 euros, and you get a product that is finished. It's packaged, it's already done. And you buy that and you play it. But there is no, or at least there hasn't been until recently, feedback loop from the way that you as a consumer play the game back into that game. The product is already done. That's completely different from the world that we live in, where the game is free to play, and there is no such thing really as the game as a product. The product is continually changing. So every day we are making changes to the game. Every week we are adding content. Every quarter we are releasing major feature updates. So the user is not buying a product. So why do they pay? What makes them pay in our game? As I said, you can play the game entirely for free if you choose to do so. There is nothing to stop you doing that. You can play all the way to the end for free. So why? Why do our consumers actually spend money? Well, in some ways, I think it's more similar to House of Cards. As many of you know, when Netflix released House of Cards, they released all episodes for that series at one point in time. That was very different to the way TV had been presented to the consumer in the past. So you think of something like Game of Thrones, which even now, you can only watch 1 week. You watch 1 episode 1 week. You have to wait another week to watch the next episode. House of Cards, all episodes were available at the same time. And they did that because they felt that the user gets so entertained, so engrossed by that program, that they're willing to pay to keep being entertained and not have to wait. And so Dragon City takes elements from both of these. Yes, it's a game, but we want, and we do make it so entertaining, that our consumers can't bear the thought of having to wait to progress in the game, and they're willing to pay to avoid that waiting. So how do we make the game so entertaining, so fun, that users don't want to have to wait? Well, that's actually really challenging, because what's fun for me may not be fun for you. It's very, very hard to define what fun is. It's a little bit easier if we flip it around the other way and think about what is not fun. Usually we tend to agree on what is not fun. If something's unfair, it's not fun. If something doesn't work, it's not fun. So in our first example here, what we spend at the beginning of the game, what we spend our time looking for is those points in the game that are not fun. So those points in the game where we are losing users. Users tell us it's not fun by closing the app and walking away. So we do something like this. I should say all the data in the presentation has been changed to protect social point, but the direction of the results is similar to what we look at. This is showing you the progression of the user through the tutorial. So at the start of Dragon City, there is a tutorial explaining to the user how the game works, hopefully getting the user entertained and engrossed within the game. That tutorial for an average user lasts about 3 minutes, and we track the progress of the user every 5 seconds on average through that first tutorial. So that first onboarding process is very, very important to us. What these lines show you, on the left-hand side is the steps through the tutorial, and the right-hand side is the percentage of users that complete each step. Ideally, we would want 100% for every single step. That's a little bit unrealistic, because obviously some people will figure out Dragon City is not quite for them and close the app. We have a rule of thumb that we don't want to lose more than 1% of users at any point through that tutorial. So where we do see a gap of more than 1%, that's where we will dive deeper and try and find out what it is that's not fun in that step and remove that. This graph is the same thing, but it's flipped on its side and shown to you over time. And you can see the spike upwards in the graph in July. That was where we did find something that wasn't fun in the game. Turns out we were in the tutorial asking users to spend a gem. We were trying to teach them how to spend the in-game currency. We'd given them in-game currency, so they weren't being asked to spend real money. However, many users thought they were being asked to spend real money and closed the app at that point. We changed the explanation and the text around that. We made it far more clear that this was free. They did not have to spend real money. And you can see the uplift that we got. We got higher tutorial completion rates almost overnight, 22%. So that's the first example. First and foremost, we believe that if the game is fun, the money will come. So we focus very much on driving fun, on making sure the game is entertaining and engrossing. We do at the same time still do more traditional monetization or revenue analysis. And this is an example of a logistic regression analysis that we did recently, where we were trying to figure out what were the characteristics of people that paid twice in our game. And we started with a set of hypotheses. The first hypothesis was that people who did a lot of battles in the game would be willing to pay more. So as I said, there were two elements in the game, battle or breeding. We hypothesized that people that battled a lot would pay more. Turns out we were completely wrong. It was insignificant how many battles you did. Then we thought, okay, it's not the number of battles. It's whether or not you win or lose the battles. We thought maybe if you lost a battle, that might encourage you to pay, to level up your dragon, to fight again. Turns out we were wrong again, completely insignificant. And at that point, we breathed a huge sigh of relief. Why? Because we don't want to create a game that's pay to win. It's super important to us that the game is not pay to win. That if you choose to play for free, you can play and you can enjoy the game just as much as someone who pays. So we were super pleased that the battles were not significant because a pay-to-win game is unfair, and we know that something unfair is not fun. So we turned away from battles and we looked at breeding. We thought, okay, well, if it's not about battles that drives people to make a transaction, maybe it's breeding. There are 400 dragons to collect. Maybe they're paying to fill in number 398. Turns out no. Completely insignificant, is not correlated with how many breedings or how many dragons that you do. What we did find, however, was what you did in that first transaction, how you spent your money in that first transaction, was hugely significant. This is the starter pack. You can see it's a combination offer. We give the user gold, dragon, gems, food, and we give it to them at a very cheap price. When we introduced this into the game, we had thoughts in our head, they were along economic theory lines, that maybe there are psychological transaction costs that prevent our users from making payments in the game. So not only do you have to be willing to spend money, but you have to be willing to trust Social Point, this company you may not have heard of, that we will deliver the gold or dragons that you were expecting. So we thought, okay, maybe there's a barrier to the consumer making that first purchase. So let's lower the price of that first purchase, help people get over that barrier, and maybe that will encourage them to start making lots and lots of transactions. It makes sense. It sounded sensible at the time. Our conversion rate went up. However, when we did our analysis, we found that users who bought via the starter pack were 79% less likely to make a second purchase in the game. So something was wrong. Either our economic theory or the pack, something was wrong. So what we did next was an A/B test. As you would, we had an A/B test with the starter pack. We had 4 groups, the control group with the starter pack, a group with no starter pack whatsoever, a group with a starter pack but less gold and gems and things, and then a group with more. And you can see these are not the exact results, but the direction is in line. The average revenue per user was significantly higher if we did not have the starter pack. So what did we do? We removed the starter pack, right? Well, it's not that easy in our industry, unfortunately. As I said to you, the vast majority of people do not pay. They play the game for free. And so what we have is we end up having a very, very long tail and a very few people who spend a lot of money in the game. That makes it a little bit tricky when we're doing A/B tests because we have to be very careful of these people who spend a lot in the game. And when we looked across our 4 groups, our A/B testing software had done a good job, and it had allocated those people across all 4 groups. The problem was there just weren't very many of them. There were about 10 of these very high spenders in each group. So out of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people we had in the A/B test, we only had 10 very, very high spenders in each A/B testing group. So that was a little bit challenging. What should we do with those high spenders? We then discovered another, not problem, but issue, was that people playing on the Apple devices have a slightly different curve to people playing on an Android device. People on an Apple device are much more likely to spend and to spend more than people on an Android device. So we dug a little bit deeper, and we actually split the results by iOS and Android, and we took out those outliers, those very, very high spenders. And then the results were a little bit less clear. So still, on Apple, getting rid of the starter pack would increase revenue. But on Android, just reducing the resources in the starter pack would increase revenue. And that's where we are today. We're still thinking about how to deal with this. This is challenging. If we were just to go with the analytical results, we would remove the starter pack from Apple devices, but we would leave it on Android devices. The challenge with that is it conflicts a little bit with the business reality. Do we really want our users who can play on both devices if they choose to have a different experience based on the device they're playing on? And do we want the complexity of having 2 different products across 2 different devices? So that's where we are today, and if you keep playing Dragon City, you'll be able to see and find out what we actually end up deciding upon. So that's the conclusion of my talk. In summary, when we think about increasing revenue, we face a number of challenges in the free-to-play gaming model. The first is that the game is free. So it's hard to think about increasing revenue when the product itself is free. The second is the best way to increase revenue is to make the game more fun. But defining what fun is challenging. And then thirdly, traditional tools like A/B testing tools are possible but difficult when the data is not normally distributed. So if those sorts of challenges sound interesting and exciting to you, we are recruiting. We do have a number of open positions, so either talk to me afterwards, talk to one of my team, or send me an email at my email address. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
You were mentioning that, so the example that you gave us is a mix of economic theory and insight generation. But then earlier on, Manuel mentioned that the hackathon that you're doing is a churn prediction model. So I wanted to ask you, in general, what is the role of predictive modeling that you see in a company like Social Point? And more in particular, what are you trying to get out of the churn model?
That's a very good question. So the role of predictive modeling is at the heart of what we do, because we can change the way we interact with individuals. So if I know that maybe you're about to leave Dragon City, I may choose to encourage you to play one of the other games of Social Point. So we can change the game. We have that flexibility that the product is continually changing. We can change the game on the basis of what we predict.
And I would imagine that this is, it is very challenging to find a middle ground for modeling games, given that it's such a changing thing over time. And this is in sharp contrast with other companies like banks and telecom companies that have more stable products and operations over time.
It's true. One of our challenges and one of the reasons we have so much data is because the data gets stale very, very quickly. So the product changes very, very fast. And so we don't look at data that's 3 months old. We don't look at data that's 6 months old because that's a different product. So we look in very short time horizons.
OK, well, we can continue later on with the whole audience. So thanks, Sharon.